Hello, and welcome to AUW's webinar on social justice. My name is Shannon Wolf, and I'm the Managing Director and Chief of Staff at AAUW's National Office. We have a wonderful panel tonight and discussion on social justice that is going to be led by Dr. Melissa Ingram-LaDuke, who is Chair of our Inclusion and Equity Committee and a National AAUW member. We also have with us Trish Garner, who's also a member of our Inclusion and Equity Committee and a member of our Portland, Oregon branch. In addition to that, Trish has served as Oregon State Public Policy Chair for many years. I hope all of you have had a chance to check out AAUW's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Toolkit. I will put a link in the chat to that after I'm done with my opening remarks here, but if you hadn't had a chance to check it out, please do so. It has a ton of wonderful resources created by our Inclusion and Equity Committee. The committee has also developed a series of plug and play programs, which assists branches with their programming. You can find those plug and plays within the toolkit. And tonight we'll be talking about one of them, which is on the topic of social justice. I want to thank Anna Nygren for her work on the social justice plug and play, as well as Trish and Melissa for their work. And with that, I would welcome everybody, and I'll throw it over to Melissa.
Thanks so much, Shannon. So before we start the actual meat of our presentation, we want to make sure that you know how to navigate to this space in the toolkit. So there are two ways to get to the Inclusion and Equity Toolkit. So the first one is by clicking on the Member tab on the main AAUW page. From there, you would click on Governance and Tools. The other way to do it is to click the little search feature and then type in DEI Toolkit. Either way, you will reach this page that has a few different tools and links to other parts of the AAUW website. The third link down is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Toolkit. We suggest for this topic and other main topics within DEI to click on the key terms and concepts. You'll see this at the very top of the page. And then when you scroll down, you'll see the main terms and concepts covered in this part of the toolkit. Today, we are covering the social justice part of the DEI toolkit. And with that, I will turn it over to Trish.
All right. Thank you so much, Shannon and Melissa. We're here today to talk about social justice. What is it? I want to mention that when I was asked to prepare a presentation on social justice, I knew it was a huge topic, rightly so. I believe that my challenge was going to be, how can I winnow down, how can I limit the mountain of references to social justice so I could come up with, some sort of reasonable introduction or presentation. What really surprised me, and I presume you too, was the relative lack of articles and other resources discussing and specifically using the words social justice. From the slide here, you can see, at least from my standpoint, what I believe constitute an important part of social justice, and in the words of others. You can see from the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Maya Angelou, I not only have the right to stand up for myself, but I have the responsibility. I can't ask someone else to stand up for me if I won't stand up for myself. Amen. On Anne Frank, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. I hope you agree that those are inspiring words regarding social justice. But to continue, again, trying to find out something about social justice, so it wasn't just me spouting my own thoughts. I looked into some history, religion, etc. Interestingly enough, Plato, his keystone of social justice had nothing to do with equality or freedom, but harmony based on everybody in their place. Religions offered a new and improved version of universal and social justice. I've set out some examples here. They're not exhaustive examples, and I cannot call myself an expert by any stretch when talking about issues of religion. But each of them talk about equitable distribution, higher purpose, caring, compassion, the notion that we are all interdependent. In the 18th century, the scientific revolution and enlightenment brought a new way of looking at social justice, individual liberty, the achievement of equal rights, the common bonds of all humanity. I'm sure you can hear some reference from the historical and religious concept I mentioned before. However, that said, those words sound wonderful, but unfortunately, those are words, and it's not the end of the story. I refer to just two. I mean, there are so many examples. It's amazing, but our Constitution, of course, all men are created equal. Anyone see a problem with that? Have we achieved that? And, you know, what about women? What about others who are not necessarily identifying themselves as men or women? Of course, the Constitution says congressional representation is to be determined by the number of free persons, excluding, however, Indians not taxed and 3/5 of all other persons. As I say, we certainly haven't gotten there. There are a number of types of social justice that I've identified: distributive justice, procedural justice, retributive justice, restorative justice. I think retributive justice is what we pretty often see in our criminal system. Procedural talks just about that. You know, procedures should be fair. Distributive is talking about people getting a fair share or portion of resources. And restorative justice, which really focuses on healing wounds and restoring offenders to law-abiding lives. As I said, social justice, I didn't find those words, social justice, very frequently, amazingly enough. But I certainly found a number of sources talking about various interests and slices of, shall we say, the social justice pie. And again, this list is not exhaustive. Gender justice, racial, climate, economic, healthcare, criminal, LGBTQ+, elder children, and more. So as we can see, social justice is not the easiest concept to put one's finger on. However, we have some excellent panelists here who I am looking forward to hearing from to give us an idea of what they think about social justice. The individuals I have here, and I'll introduce them first, and then in the order of when I'm introducing them, I'll ask the first question and they can get going. Liz Marquez Gutierrez, a political organizer with the Farm Workers and Latinx Working Families United. Hola, Liz. Heather Howell, Interim Director of the YWCA of Greater Portland. Hey, Heather. Eve Nanez, a student and Indigenous Diaspora Events Coordinator at the Multicultural Resource Center at Reed College in Portland. So starting with you, Liz, what is your relationship to social justice? What's it mean to you? 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And I'm very happy to be here and to share more about what social justice means to me and my community and the work that I do. So I'm a political organizer with Pineros and Campesinos Unidos del Noroeste. Our mission is to empower farm workers and working Latinx families in Oregon through community building, increasing Latinx representation in elections, and policy advocacy in both national and state levels. I'm an immigrant. My parents are both immigrants. I come from a working class family. specifically low-wage workers. And as a DACA recipient, I didn't have access to financial aid for college. So college was inaccessible for me. And it's those experiences from both my parents and their working conditions and me not having access to higher education as easily as it probably should be. I became an advocate for workers' rights, for farm workers, for low-wage workers, and also for accessibility and affordability for higher education.
That's great. And I will also say Liz and AAUW of Oregon worked very hard in our last legislative session to pass a bill that grants farm workers overtime. I will tell you, there are a lot of exceptions and ifs, ands, and buts, and it's going to take a while to really accomplish. But Liz, you did a fabulous job, and we appreciate it. Heather, how about you? Social justice. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Heather Hale, and as Trish said, I'm the Interim Executive Director of YWCA. I'm also a former AAUW employee working out of the Washington office, so it's great to be able to be back with family tonight. I've spent my career working in social justice, starting with the Human Rights Campaign, doing political work, running congressional campaigns across the country, moving on to AAUW, Planned Parenthood, and now the YWCA. My favorite definition of social justice is when everyone in a society equally shares benefits and burdens. We are not there today. Which is why the Y continues to do work to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. We serve 10,000 women and their families a year in the greater Portland area. And I'm happy to say more about that, but are really thrilled to be part of a broad coalition of folks here in the Portland area working in working to move forward social justice.
Great, thanks, Heather. Eve.
Hello.
Hi.
Very nice to be here and nice to meet the both of you and have the opportunity to be on this panel. So thank you for that. As Trish said, I am a student at Reed College and I'm going to be finishing up my senior year there. And I work in the Multicultural Resource Center under the Institution of Diversity at Reed College, and am tasked with creating programs and doing community outreach to Portland's Indigenous communities here and Native students on campus. So working at the student level to just like create some sense of home and connectedness and welcoming spaces, like through community programming of meals and movie nights, and just, yeah, working at a smaller level than what is being done, but still very important. And I think through that, I've grown to know social justice, like through my experience as a Native person growing up on the reservation and in the city, as the basic, equitable, fair treatment of everyone regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, and ensuring that as like a moral grounding of doing what is right, regardless of civil or federal laws. And I think that's how I've gotten to know it. Yeah.
All right, well, I'm gonna start with Heather here. What do you think we can do to become engaged with and promote social justice? And you can take 3 minutes, whatever. But what really can we do? I mean, it's this big concept. Gosh, what can we do?
Can y'all hear me? Yeah, my computer's being really sticky with the mute thing. So sorry about
No
that.
problem. No problem.
I am a white woman, and I work for what is a mainline white feminist organization, much like AAUW. And so I would say that the first thing that all of us can do is to be as intentional as possible about shifting our organization, honoring our history, but moving into and embracing our future. So first and foremost, getting educated, understanding what the issues are and understanding what the impacts are of our systems and our policies. And then finding intentional ways to engage, whether that means partnering with organizations and ensuring that their voices are being raised, and that they are being respected, making sure that your environments, the events that you host, the activities that you do are created and infused with an inclusive focus, and that are welcoming for folks. And really working around and looking at collaborative decision-making instead of more of a top-down, we're the organization that's sort of one of the oldest in the country. And so we know what's right, which is not an accurate statement. Locally here in Portland, YWCA of Greater Portland provides an incredibly extensive, low-cost and accessible social justice training program. We provide 500 trainings a year and put about 1 million hours of training through 2,000 community activists in the Portland area and across the country, because all of our trainings are online. So not only do we provide 40-hour training certifications for domestic violence advocates, but we are also providing social justice trainings around disability in the workplace, around race and gender, and working to protect the most vulnerable in our community, including the trans community, victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and incarcerated women. Those are the primary areas that we work. We also support low-income seniors who are working to maintain their independence and their community connections by helping them age in place and providing the unique supports that each individual requires. For so long as a society, we've painted with such a broad brush and said that everyone gets the same things, and that makes us equal. And that is not what social justice requires. It requires recognizing that we are all individuals, that we all have unique needs, and we come from unique places, and developing systems and structures that both recognize and repair past harm, and then allow people to move into their future is the best way that we all can move forward with a social justice lens.
Wow. Thanks. That was inspiring. Eve, do you have thoughts about what we can do to become engaged with, to promote, to make social justice, get a little closer to it? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to understand like the difference and similarities that like social justice and economic justice have. I think right now in the time frame that we live in, I see a lot of forms of redistribution of wealth, like as economic justice within social justice. And I think that's with an organization like this, I think that's really important. The community, like the members and the board and people in charge, I think it's important that you're investing your money in these communities and, putting your money where your mouth is essentially. I think that's been like a really big call from the public to have that. And so, yeah, just kind of, it's one thing to like, I think, function as a nonprofit and, have these umbrella programs that like you're able to do a lot of good, but I think it's also important to be direct in your intentions of engaging with the community, not so much from a like disconnected form. And I'm not saying that that's what that is, but you know, I think you know, there's a lot of growth to be had of like, how can we like, you know, be part of this community in a way that allows us to get to know these people on a deeper level, on a personal level, and from there see what is needed and then move forward from there. Yeah, I think those are my thoughts.
Good ones, good ones. All right, Liz.
Yeah, this is a great question. I think that there's a lot of work to do. And I think the way I think about it is we're all part of this larger community in this society, and we have an equal responsibility to ensure the well-being of each other. So that's part of, I think, like where my journey begins in like engaging in social justice work. And then from there, for me, it's understanding my privileges, biases, and prejudices. And understanding how I contribute to systems of oppression for another person or group of people. And that's also, you know, very important for us to understand and start deconstructing together systems of oppression, because we can't do it individually. We need to do this together. And I think the other part, which has been said, is using the resources that we have at our disposal, whether it's time, you know, volunteering for organizations or groups. And, you know, if you have time to show up to rallies, to support folks, showing up to movements, if you have the means to donate to organizations doing the work and empowering people to do that work. And then also, you know, we have at our disposal now, I think, a lot of tools in terms of raising awareness or spreading the word faster about issues that are happening through social media, and just not being silent about the issues because it makes us uncomfortable is really also an important part of social justice work. And I think also using our positions, whether it's, you know, for me, like as a political organizer or as professors, being able to use our positions to raise awareness and raise people's consciousness about the issues our society is currently facing, and issues that maybe they are not aware of. Yeah, I think that's what I would say about engaging in social justice work.
Sounds to me like you all are talking about affirmatively engaging, doing something, you know, perhaps not solving everything at once, but at least making the effort. I have a...
Trish, if I could just jump in, I would say that one of the, I think, most exciting programs that the YWCA has right now, as we're thinking about being intentional with our dollars and raising voices, is a fiscal sponsorship program where we are helping 30 other emerging nonprofit organizations led by and for women and people of color to use our 501c3 nonprofit status to build their own capacity, secure donations, and be able to stand up a community-led organization. So again, thinking about being a long-standing, highly structured feminist organization like AAUW, finding the ways to use those structures to support other emerging organizations.
Sounds to me like for all of you, this by definition requires some creativity, and frankly, some self-thought and self-examination and research, looking to other points of view. There's a word, inclusion, that gets used a lot and clearly is related to social justice. But in a large organization, whether you look at it like for AAUW from a national standpoint or from an affiliate or a state standpoint, what are your thoughts about how to give real voice and action to the concept of inclusion? I know it's kind of easy to say, well, we're open, come on down. But I'm not so sure that that's the answer. Do any of you can like raise your hand if you want to comment on how do we do inclusion? Okay, well then I'm gonna be bad. I'm calling you, Eve. And for you, hopefully this is appropriate, but Eve gave a wonderful presentation on Thanksgiving to the state of Oregon, AUW of Oregon. And she was brave enough to really reframe Thanksgiving. It wasn't easy. And I think some of our members were, you mean it wasn't just Puritans and so on? You mean there's another story there? And of course, what we learned about Thanksgiving and all sorts of, well, the history of Indigenous people bears little relationship to what actually took place. But within that framework, how do you see inclusion? In other words, when someone puts on their Puritan hat and so on, how do you deal with that? What can we do about it?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that it is still developing today on how we can appropriately make inclusive spaces all around us. I think that there's so much, just like part one of that is just, there's so much about physical space that I think is important to understand about like creating inclusive spaces. It's interesting to think about how oppression and white supremacy transform in physical spaces, how that they are embodied in these spaces. What is deemed as welcoming to people of color? How do you actually get minorities and other folks to want to be involved in this, even when you're just saying like, yeah, come on down, like what you're talking about. I think.
Can you give an example? I know I'm interrupting you, but can you give an example?
Oh, no, you're fine.
Perhaps, what made you feel welcome, and perhaps an example of perhaps an unintentional, but an act that did not make you feel included.
Yeah. The first thing that's coming to mind right now is tribal housing and how tribal communities have in their own way and with each nation have transformed the way that they want to physically structure their community, with the presence of, US colonialism and boarding schools. You're kind of really physically separating these people, and that's impacting, the way and their ability to connect with each other and like language preservation and stuff. And so I think it's really interesting, and like the earliest way that like I can remember feeling like this is an inclusive space is seeing how community members live around each other, how the buildings are structured in this type of like semicircle with like community spaces in it, and there being like access to like art rooms that are shared and community kitchens and community gardens. And like I think that, this is obviously in the housing level, but like I think that that says a lot about like how you want people to interact with each other, and like very different from like the modern apartment buildings we see today and the building that I live in right now here in Portland. So yeah, I think that that is a pretty good example of just like at that one level of physical space, how we can be inclusive. And then I think, on the other hand, like, coming from the reservation and, being here at Reed, and like, it's a totally different environment and setting and like not what I was used to. I think that at the very first encounter was like, I understand that this is not meant for me, not, let me rephrase that. It was not intended for people like me. It was not intended for POC to be at this space. And we can see that in just how they represent themselves and, you know, frame what the college is. And I think that they've done a lot of good work in, you know, trying to reframe that to be more inclusive, but there's still, yeah, again, a long way to go. So yeah, I think those are my thoughts on that.
Liz, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, and of course, then I'd like Heather to talk about this too. But you know, the concept of inclusion, what does that really mean? And if you could also talk about community, you know, and its relative importance. So, what are your thoughts about inclusion?
Yeah, I think it's I think what Eve was mentioning is how I feel about spaces. It's being intentional is my word about who you would want to bring into any space. And I think by that, I mean being careful with not like tokenizing people who are already marginalized, because that further creates like more oppression, you know, and systems of injustice. And I think having that space, understanding like what is the purpose, you know, like what are we trying to accomplish? Is it just, you know, to save face, you know, to say we have a person of color, or we have a woman in this space, or someone from the LGBTQ community. So really taking the time to understand, again, like what we contribute to that, and if the space is welcoming to people from, you know, historically marginalized communities, and what our intentions are with that, and are we really committed to building justice with them, and hearing, you know, from their perspectives and their experiences, because that's what gets us to achieve justice when we create an inclusive space, is allowing people to fully participate. And I think for me, what I've like continued to learn is, you know, with the Farm Work Overtime Coalition, is hearing the feedback from folks and saying that they felt really, you know, in sync in community, because we had a lot of diverse coalition partners, you know, from across the state. And I think one of the great things that I heard was it felt different from other coalitions that they were part of, because all of our meetings and all of our materials were bilingual. And so everyone felt like they felt comfortable to fully participate in the language of their choice, and the language they felt comfortable. So yeah, I would say like being intentional about the spaces.
Wonderful, great. Great insights. Heather.
I agree with everything that Eve and Liz said. You know, diversity is a fact, but inclusion is an act, and it requires intentionality. And it also can be really, really simple. Do you use your pronouns in your Zoom profile or when you introduce yourself? Does somebody greet people when they come to a meeting for a very first time? Do you do introductions at every single meeting, even if people know each other, so that everybody has a reminder of who's in the room and feels comfortable? The way that you set up your agendas, are they incredibly heavily wordy, or do they also use graphics and images? Do you provide presentations in multiple formats, including things like words and pictures, conversation and images, you know, things so that all kinds of different people can be able to access or engage? One of the things that I think can feel so hard for all of us is walking into a space where you don't know anybody. And it gets even harder if none of the people look like you, or you think that they will have any connection to you. So thinking about space design, about meeting structure, about welcoming people that you don't know instead of assuming someone else is going to do it, making sure there's a greeter at meetings. All of those things, I think, can go an incredibly long way to helping people feel like they belong.
You're here. I know the first time I went to a meeting. It was a community meeting, and I was the only white face there. I actually recommend everybody do that. It's really a very powerful experience. How people talk, how they engage with each other, how the meeting is organized, what's a meeting, how loud, how soft, I mean, frankly, just being another skin color, you just feel like, boo, I'm huge, and I'm stick out, and so on. I think it's quite an interesting experience. I would also like to ask you all, and I'll start with Liz. Is there an individual or a circumstance? I think you talked about college and such like that, but perhaps something that you've read or someone that you've met or learned about that has inspired you to do the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think I always get my inspiration from my parents, who who have sacrificed so much to bring our family to this country, to give us better opportunities, and all the support that I received from them throughout my journey through higher education, which was very difficult, as I mentioned, and not giving up. So I would say seeing their experiences and the way that they have struggled inspires me, and it grounds me every time when I find that because social justice work is very difficult, especially if you are part of a community that has been historically oppressed. It's very hard to continue to see that day to day. And they're my inspiration and my motivation, because when I was growing up, I wanted someone to advocate for our family, or wondered if there were any organizations that advocated for, our rights. And so it's that commitment and those experiences that ground me every day to continue fighting for families like mine.
Okay. Heather, how about you?
I come to this work as a survivor and as someone who lives with a hidden disability that impacts every part of my life. So knowing that I have to navigate the world in a complicated way that people aren't recognizing really has driven me to try and create and ensure that I've got inclusive spaces to be in. And then I am inspired daily by the team that I support, my frontline staff who are out there and meeting survivors at the hospital and meeting women as they're being released from prison at the gate and helping them figure out how to re-enter society, and sitting in homes with seniors and holding their hand and helping them figure out how to maintain their cultural connections. That work is incredible. It is changing the world one person at a time. And that's why I keep getting out of bed.
Well, it seems to me that one of the things that you're, yes, here, that you're talking about is our whole concept of normal. Well, Heather, you look normal. Of course, white face does not equal normal by any definition. And I'm sure that has a interesting challenge for you. Eve, how about you? A particular inspiration or something that got you going down the path of social justice?
I think I also feel similarly to Liz. I think of my family. I think about my grandmother a lot. She was, I don't know, she did what she had to do, I guess, and did it because she had no other choice. And along this process, got her doctorate in linguistics and is a professor at the University of New Mexico, and did all of that without any of the privileges being a white person, or that comes with that no monetary, support from that. Like, she did that all on her own. And I think that whenever I am feeling like really exhausted in the academic setting that I'm in, I think about that and just how important the work that she does is. And, I really would love to follow along the path that she has created in Southwest Indian language revitalization and language policy. Sorry. And yeah, I think that, I don't know. Yeah, just feeling the same. There's a lot of feelings right now. Yeah.
Yes, we
Yeah.
we hear it and feel it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
absolutely,
you.
absolutely. Well, Shannon or Melissa, I don't know if you want to come on. Are there any questions that folks have here for our panelists, individually or group wise?
Yeah,
Or do you?
I do have a few things, if I could. I've been really, thank you all. This has been really wonderful and very inspiring. And I think you have given us some food for thought in terms of how every day you can act, and be in this space and be an activist, for lack of a better word, by the choices that you make every single day. And Trish, I actually have a bit of a question for you, because we've talked a lot about, Liz and Heather and Eve have talked a lot about sort of direct work we can do. We can be on social media, we can do a training, we can do it through our work, we can do it through our personal life. But Trish, your experience in working with AAUW Oregon has been really in the policy realm, which is a little bit of a different thing. Could you talk a little bit about how you sort of approached promoting social justice from a policy angle?
Wow. I think the most important thing for me was a huge learning curve about my own preconceptions, biases. I would have said, if anyone had asked, I'm one of the good guys, I don't discriminate. I worked in the 60s. Even some of my best friends are people of color. I hope that's okay. I mean, I really, in my heart of hearts, thought that. And when challenged in any way, there was this kind of, wait a minute. I think that's the bedrock of inspiration, perhaps, for me to embark on a journey. I still make mistakes. That's the way it is. That's how I was raised. But I can certainly, with intent, reach out, and that's the other part, reach out and learn other people's needs, the way they do things. What are their problems? It's not me deciding, okay, this bill looks really good, so I'm going to advocate that. It's what does this community really need, and allowing them to have voice. And then, of course, hopefully offering our support through the various levels of advocacy, locally, statewide, and so on, to put our shoulders together, put our hands together, and move forward as a larger community to embark on a larger path to social justice. Hopefully that's what you're looking for.
Yes, no, that was great. Thank you for that. I think there was a question in the chat, and I've sort of seen this a lot in some of the questions that were submitted when people were registering for the webinar, and it's really just, how can people get engaged on an everyday basis? If you work full time, you may not have a job that is working within the space. but you care about social justice and you want to do something, what are some of the best ways that you can be engaged? Heather, I'm going to call on you since you're nodding and at this time.
It's a great question. And I think there are some really easy ways, even if you are, working or trying to do laundry or get kids to bed or any of the things that we all have. Giving money is always a great idea, especially if there's an organization that you care about a lot. Setting up a monthly donation, even if it's a small one, becomes funding that organizations can count on and know is coming. Being able to sign up on newsletters that are going to give you a quick alert when a quick letter to Congress or to your state legislature or your city council needs to go off is great. I know AAUW does that, so does the Y, and that usually it comes with a template. And so it's a really easy thing for you to just shoot off. And that can be done kind of at any hour. And then a ton of organizations, the Y included, provide trainings that are available after hours, so not during a normal workday. And we make these trainings available online. They're very, very low cost. I think $15 if you pay the full rate. But setting aside some time to eat your dinner while you're taking a training online or doing those kinds of things can be a great way to really get engaged and take easy actions outside of normal business hours.
Liz or Eve, do you have a thought about that? I know I'm putting you on the spot. One of the things that I want to mention here, this isn't like a poison pill. I was talking about all this stuff that I've learned. I'm like the doubly lucky one. Number one, I had all this privilege as I was growing up, but now my world is so much more broad, more deep. And I think that's, after all, what we as human beings should be about, is learning in a real way, giving in a real way. And, it might just be a contribution or an organization that you can go to every other week, or just studying a particular issue. And then, even if it's an organization that you're not very familiar with, just take that step and learn and grow. That's what we should, I think, all be about. Personal learning, community learning, collaborating.
Yeah, read a book on the bus, or bring, put a social justice book as your next book club discussion. Go out to brunch with some friends and pick a topic from the news and talk about it, and then ask folks which organizations they know might be doing good work in that area. Crowdsource from the people that you have relationships with, and look for those easy opportunities.
Eve.
I think also on that note, I really think that a great first way of starting these conversations is just talking with your neighbors and what are they going through? And even if you don't live in a super diverse neighborhood, I think, yeah, what we were talking about, Google is a great resource. And it's okay to Google these questions of what is social justice? What is racial justice? What is anti-racism? I think that there's so many good online resources available now that you can get through the web. And also just these conversations of what your neighbors and your community members are going through to see. Sorry. And just, yeah, lost my train of thought. Sorry, but yeah, no, just community community gatherings are so great. And I think that that's an excellent first way of, starting those conversations. Sorry for the chat.
Yes, Liz. I guess
Yeah.
Shannon, you should be calling on people, so go ahead.
Okay,
Sorry.
we were both going to say the same thing. Liz, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think having conversations with family, with loved ones about issues, and again, bringing up how we should get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that is part of the really important work, not just showing up to, community, like to these communities and saying, oh, I want to support without understanding, how we play a role in systems of oppression. And I think there's a lot of great, resources from scholars of color, in terms of like what social justice means for our communities or for, other communities. And I think having that, that education or that knowledge from communities on what they need, and not just coming in and saying, oh, I think you need this, is really important work too.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other ways that a lot of our folks that are on the webinar tonight are in AAUW branches. And one of the other ways they can do it is by looking at the plug and plays that the Inclusion and Equity Committee has established. So Melissa, were you going to go through the plug and play for us?
I would love to. Thanks so much, Shannon.
Why don't I segue just like that?
Perfect.
Well, before you segue, I just want to just particularly thank so much for our panelists for taking the time to come, and speak with us and engage. I'm not saying you have to leave. I just want to make sure that you understand that.
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of your perspectives tonight. A really great discussion.
So unfortunately, we don't have this depth of knowledge yet on our toolkit, but we are working towards it. But as someone mentioned in the comments, this recording will be posted on the AAUW website for anyone to review and glean all of these this amazing knowledge later on. But for now, in our plug and play programming, we have all of these kind of lesson plans for our branches in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Toolkit. If you're in our toolkit, scroll all the way down to the bottom and you will see this link called Plug and Play DEI Programming. When you click on the link, you will see a ton of different programs, and we break it down so that if someone doesn't have facilitator experience, they are able to go through this and hopefully conduct a successful session on any given topic. So for today's webinar, we want to look at the Understanding Social Justice program. So we see these 4 areas. And in the overview area, we just kind of give the so what. Why does this topic matter to branches or to people in general? And then we give some recommendations on how the program should be executed in the branch. So we give some tips to the facilitators on how to prepare for the session, both before the session happens and then during the session itself. And we always want to recommend to read both the social justice section or the topic of that webinar within the toolkit. And then we also want our facilitators to look at the Getting Started with Difficult Conversations, because a lot of what we cover has quite a few different viewpoints, and we want to make sure that we are inclusive in our discussions and execute a very respectful session. In addition to our facilitator prep, we do have some expectations that we outline for the facilitators and the participants, so everyone has a common ground when we start these discussions. And then we give some ideas on how to implement the program. For this particular plug and play, we suggest a few different videos. We also later on suggest how to facilitate some other activities. And there is a question on recommending a social justice book for your book club. I did a bad job of capturing all of it, but there is an additional resource section that's associated with the various topics on the toolkit itself. So if you want a book club reference or book club ideas for any given topic that's in our toolkit, please click on the additional resources section and you'll be able to see videos, activities, and some books on the topic that we recommend. So I think it was covered at the very beginning, but this is our very last webinar for this year. We're going to give these hardworking folks a break for the summer, and we'll be back in fall with topics of interest to all of you. So with that, I will turn it back over to Shannon.
Great, thanks, Melissa. I just wanted to say thank you once again to all of our panelists tonight. Trish, thank you so much for moderating. Really appreciate it. I really appreciate Melissa's leadership on the Inclusion and Equity Committee. This is her first year as chair, and she's done just really an excellent job. And the committee has done a lot of work on these plug and play programs over the years. So I really hope that everyone checks those out. It's available on our website to the public, so you don't have to be a member to access them. A lot of really, really great resources. And of course, thanks to our three panelists tonight, Eve, Heather, and Liz. Really appreciate you taking your time to spend with us this evening. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up. I hope everyone has a really wonderful evening and that you have a lot of food for thought and go out and do something great. All right, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.